Gendron, so I teach biology at the First Nations University, and that's Dawn. So I will start, and then eventually we'll switch and go back and forth. Just a outline for the presentation. So I will tell you where our project took place, and then I'll talk about the prairie gardens, like a project that I'm really interested in at the university. We will talk about the workshops in the medicine room that we have at the First Nations University. Then we'll talk about the chunk of our presentation, which is the Indigenous Food System Project, partnerships that we have this year, a scan that we did, and a survey, like a paper that we wrote that is compiling the results. Okay, so that's a picture of the First Nations University. Maybe like if you've been around the university during the summertime, we have lots of beautiful native plants around the university. So that's the native prairie. It's an area that has been restored. So we have planted plants that are native to the province. So during the talk will mention the community gardens here. They're at the First Nations University, so they are like between the building and Ring Road, which is here. I will talk about the native prairie at the university, so that's what we have here. The picture on the previous slide was taken like from here, looking at the garden like this. So we have an area here that we leave uncut during the summer. And we have lots of sage plants that are growing there, so people from the community can come and harvest sage for ceremonies. We also have, I'll have some photos of the demonstration gardens. This is where we, sometimes we have workshops. And so we talk about native plants, and people who are interested to plant native plants in their backyard, they can see what the plants look like. And we also have a medicine wheel at the university. So that's I think the picture was taken during the fall. So that's a nice picture because we see everything. We see the different structures. Okay, so first of all, as I said, I'll talk about the native prairie that we have at the First Nations University. So that's a project that has been started a few years ago. So in 2003, at the time, that's when the new building, the new First Nations University of Canada building, that's when it opened. So we had, like on the outside, we had the grass, but there was also a big space where we wanted to have native plants, okay, like plants that were here hundreds of years ago. So the space was seeded during that fall, and so now it's an area where we can learn about native plants. Okay, unfortunately, there's not a lot of native prairies that are left untouched in Saskatchewan. Like they say that there's probably less than 20% that are untouched prairies in Saskatchewan, but this number is actually high. Like some people will say like 2 or 3%. That would be more realistic of what is left intact in Saskatchewan. So it's nice to have these areas that are restored where we actually plant the native plants that were here before. And of course, major threats to prairie is lots of invasive plants, so plants that don't belong here, or habitat loss, right? Like a lot of time we will, farmers, they need the land to grow plants, so they will get rid of the native species to plant their crops. So that's the picture of the medicine wheel. We saw the outline on the map before. So that's the design of the medicine wheel was given to us by a female elder. So it's the 4 directions medicine wheel. So plants, this is like, it's facing the 4 directions. So at the north you have like the white plants, so that's for the north with the winter, the snow facing east. You have the yellow plants, so that's for when the sun will rise. Facing south you have the blue plants, so the plants that were planted here that have blue flowers, so that's for the water during summertime. And this, well, we were supposed to have like mostly red plants here, and that was for the sunsets. Now what's blooming are the pink plants. It's actually a bergamot. We also have the demonstration garden, and in this plot, like in little plots, we have different species. So we have workshops over there during the summer, and we show people what native plants look like. Because something interesting about Regina is if you go to a greenhouse, well, it's really hard to buy native plants. So it's hard to buy them, and people, well, a lot of time they don't know what the native plants are. So we have some samples here. So we show people what they look like, and in the fall we give them some seeds. And actually I have another talk tomorrow at the library, and I will be giving away native plant seeds. So that's some pictures of, so I was telling you that we're giving away seeds, we're also giving away seedlings. So that's what we're doing over there. And so I'm really interested in native plants and how they were used culturally. So at the university we have a medicine room, and we have, it's actually the elders who will come and they will spend time with the participants, and they will talk about protocol, they will talk about medicines, they will talk about how to harvest the plants, how to identify the different plants. So over here we have Elder Betty. It's in the old medicine room. Now it's the medicine room is in another location, so it looks like this. So we have plants that are on display, and the elder will tell stories about these plants. And if you're interested, I have this, we have this link here. We met with, I don't know if it's gonna work. We met with different elders, and they, especially with Elder Betty, at different times during the growing season. So we have the early spring medicine walk with Elder Betty, and we have the late spring, the summer medicine walk, and we have the fall medicine walk, early fall medicine walk. So basically it's like we are in the field with Elder Betty, and she's showing us the plants that are growing. Okay, so I'll go back here. So that's a part of what we do. Now Don will tell you a little bit more. Here we go. Don't get mixed up in the wires.
Just hang on to this one. I'm going to talk a little bit about our project that we initiated last year. We put a grant application in with the Community Initiatives Fund, and we were successful and received $25,000 to put on this project. And we put on the project from May to October 2013. And our focus was on exploring and revitalizing Indigenous food systems with Indigenous families in Saskatchewan. Initially, we wanted to do all of Saskatchewan, but because we didn't get as much funding as we'd hoped for, we limited it to the Regina area. We had a variety of goals. We wanted to improve food security, nutrition, and health for the participants. We wanted to increase knowledge and skills in growing, gathering, and preserving Indigenous foods. We wanted to increase knowledge around Indigenous food systems in Saskatchewan and explore them at the same time, and increase connections between elders and youth, and strengthen local food networks. Some people might ask, what's an Indigenous food system? Indigenous food systems are all those relationships and species that, that are important to Indigenous communities and families. So Indigenous foods that people used to eat, perhaps there's new farming systems that are important to Indigenous community. There's a difference between food security and food sovereignty, and that is that the closer you are to your foods, the more you know about your local food systems, the fresher your foods, the more food secure you are, the more access that you have to foods locally. And food sovereignty is about awareness and choices. So the more knowledge you have about those systems, those food systems, where your food comes from, what kind of choices do you have, and the more self-determination you have in choosing where you harvest your foods, where you hunt, fish, gather, where you garden, the more choice that you have, the more food sovereign you are. Some of the activities we had, we hired part-time students. We had one coordinator and 4 gardeners, and we held a variety of workshops and incorporated traditional protocols. At each workshop we had mini feasts. We brought in Indigenous foods and teas so that people could sample them and so that we could practice what we're preaching. And we invited volunteers. We put out calls for volunteers to come in and work with both the workshops and the gardens that we have on campus. And we another activity was to try and grow traditional foods and medicines. So we tried to grow corn, beans, and squash. Initially, we looked for whatever seeds or plants that were available that were Indigenous foods that were important to people in Saskatchewan. But like Fiji mentioned, we couldn't locate those on a short time frame. So we grew regular vegetables. We did grow a lot of squash. Our corn made it to about this high, and then our rabbits and gophers took over. In fact, they harvested at least 3/4 of our garden for themselves. And what was left, we had about 100 pounds of produce left, and we shared that with students at the university, so we put it out by the reception area. We also had a lot of tobacco. This is really interesting learning to me because I brought two seeds, Mohawk seeds and Hopi seeds. And the Mohawk seeds weren't viable in this kind of climate, but the Hopi seeds, which have similar conditions down in Hopi territory, they blossomed, and we had ongoing harvests of tobacco from those plants. So it's all about learning, all those different kinds of learning. We provided some garden tours. People would drop by and ask about the gardens. We developed a Facebook page. We have about 76 members. We share a lot of information and ideas. Some people are trading foods and medicines. And we're connected with other Facebook pages in other provinces as well. We're trying to network with other food activities. So the BC Food Systems Network Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty, they have a gathering every year. There's a gathering coming up in Manitoba. There's Food Secure Canada gatherings. So the more we can share information about Indigenous food systems, the more we can support those systems. Our partners, the partners for this project were First Nations University of Canada, North Central Community Association. They provided space for our workshops, and the Indian Métis Christian Fellowship. They offered their kitchen facilities. Again, our funding was primarily the Community Initiative Fund grant for $25,000, and Sask Power, Shan Greenhouse, they provided seedlings, about $2,000 worth of seedlings for a prairie. So we hired students. I think I've mentioned most of this stuff now. This was really labor intensive, so we had a lot of hands-on work, preparing the ground, fertilizing, digging, weeding, watering was a major labor-intensive activity. And then gardeners also helped the coordinator in planning and delivering the workshops. The actual workshops that we held, we had 8 elders who led a variety of workshops. So we had a planting ceremony to start. Then we talked about traditional hunting, traditional gathering, the foods, home remedies, traditional diets, and diabetes. We had medicine walks out in the prairie. And then there were sacred food teachings. And then at the end we had a harvest ceremony. So we tried to ensure that things were done in a respectful way. We offered tobacco, we provided food and welcoming environments for everybody. And they were well attended. We had a good core of about 15 to 20 people that would attend, and those people changed over the workshops. Oops. Okay, invite volunteers. So in this area, we didn't get as many volunteers as we'd hoped. We put out a few flyers, and mostly the volunteers that came were friends and family of either the staff or people who had attended the workshops. This is a picture of the tobacco once it's gone to seed. And we also have a picture of the corn before it got harvested. This is a picture of the squash. The squash just took over. I guess the gophers and rabbits aren't very interested in the squash. And this is a new teaching for me. This was prairie seaweed. And Elder Betty McKenna talked about it. And because one of my burning questions was, around food security. In BC, I could probably go and live in the woods and be able to live off the foods there. But here I'm looking around the prairie and I'm going, what do you eat? In a survival situation. And she says, oh well, prairie seaweed. It grows everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but in certain areas. And it just happened that the whole area around our garden was covered with prairie seaweed. And they call it that because when you pick it up, it looks like dirt on the ground, but when you pick it up, it feels like dried seaweed. And when you add water, it actually expands like tenfold. And it's very nutritious. So it's a survival food. We also collected a lot of seeds. So all the plants that were viable, that grew really healthy, we collected seeds from those plants so that we can plant them in this next year. And also we're hoping to go and locate other species, Indigenous food species, and talk to elders and community members and find out where we can harvest and bring some of those species back to our gardens. With the tobacco, all of the tobacco that was harvested we gave to the elders. And so Roland Kay, he's our elder helper, he keeps those the tobacco and provides bundles for a lot of our events at First Nations University. Picture of some of our squash, pumpkins. We had about 6 organized tours in the vegetable garden area. We get a lot of people walking by as well. There's been a few events where we're listed as a part of the tour. Again, our Facebook page. If you go on our Facebook page, it's called Revitalizing Indigenous Food Sovereignty in Saskatchewan. Kind of long-winded, but you'll see a lot of information there about other events. So it's a growing field. Indigenous food sovereignty and Indigenous food systems revitalization is a growing field. There's excitement all across Canada, all kinds of initiatives that are developing. There's not a lot of funding yet. A couple of the gatherings that we went to, Ashley Norton, she was our coordinator. She went up to the Northern Saskatchewan Elders Gathering, and there was all kinds of traditional foods up there. There are more gatherings happening this year. Sturgeon Lake, I believe, is having one with folks on traditional foods. We went to the Food Secure Canada gathering, and the Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty gathering in BC. And we're also involved with the Edible Campus and the Community Research Unit. So So I'm going to talk a little bit about the that in vet. So project recommendations. Food species are unavailable for planting. We need to locate them. I mentioned this before. Find seeds or cuttings so that we can share knowledge about those species on campus. There's great support for continuing these kind of workshop programs, and to add more programs that are in the field, so more hunting, more identification out in the field, more fact sheets and written documents so that people can take them away and digest them, and more networking for knowledge for volunteers and to share knowledge on campus and in the larger community. This was a really interesting recommendation by Keith Bird. He was the one that led our traditional hunting workshop. He suggested that we work towards an urban Indigenous food processing plant so that we can share Indigenous foods in the city. And to do that, in a way that engages the local ministries and health boards and things like that, so that it's all above board, and we address those barriers, and so that we can get those foods into the city, especially for urban people. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the demand for traditional foods, which came out of our environmental scan in a bit. So this year, we've sat down with people from the RPERV supported Edible Campus project or initiative, and the Institute for Energy, Environment and Sustainable Communities. And we had a very exciting meeting. We're brainstorming about how we could share resources and share training of volunteers, share workshops, transportation. There's so many ways that we can support the work that's going on campus. The SEED project, there's already been some discussion about the SEED project. And one of the goals is to make all of the university campus edible. So you can go walk outside, you'll have some berries. There's roots, there's all kinds of shoots that you can eat. So we're quite a ways away from that, but that's one of our goals. Another initiative that we're involved with was an environmental scan of Indigenous food systems and conventional food systems within the Regina area. So initially it was just all food systems in the Regina area, and there wasn't a focus on Indigenous foods. So Annette Desmarais invited me in to add an Indigenous food component to the whole project. This environmental scan is being launched this week, and it's actually available on the website foodregina.ca. It's about a 115-page document, and the researcher that we hired, Darren Qualman, he only had 225 hours to research all the food systems within a 100-mile radius, roughly, and all the foods coming in and leaving that 100-mile radius. And the primary goal was to understand food systems and gaps in the Regina area. And for the Indigenous food system component, the Indigenous population in Regina is around 9%, yet there was virtually no research on Indigenous food systems in the Regina area. So we asked Darren to research further afield, so he looked in Saskatchewan. There's very, very little research at all. There's some health authority information about Indigenous foods, but very little specific research projects. I also found some stats regarding the use of health services in the Regina Qu'Appelle health region. So besides the 19,000 or so Indigenous people that are living in Regina, there are also another 250,000 people, First Nations, that are coming into the city and using, potentially shopping in Regina and accessing markets and things like that. So food security for Indigenous people may be a little bit larger than what the stats represent. some of the things that we found around food security. While poverty is falling for non-Indigenous people in Regina area, poverty is around 11%. It's still high. It's remaining high for First Nations people in Regina. 56% of the First Nations community, and lone parent families in particular. 57.6% of Indigenous families are lone parent families. Food bank visits in general, it was doubled since the last study was done. So between 2010 and 2012, there are 25,000 food bank visits. North Central neighborhood has the highest number of low-income families. That means under $30,000 a year of income. There's a strong association between low-income neighborhoods and high rates of suicide, mental disorders, injuries, and chronic disease. So these are all exacerbated by food insecurity. So the more impoverished you are, the lower your quality of foods, your nutrition, and that just adds to these health burdens. So as a summary, the Indigenous food systems in Regina area and in the larger Saskatchewan area are still primarily informal. There are no wild food processing facilities, no protected land or water reserves for fishing, hunting, agricultural, and gathering, although those rights are affirmed in the Constitution. Provincial abattoirs require inspection of live animals if you want to resale those meats. So we had a bit of a joke about, how do you drag a moose into a process in a provincial abattoir. There are some private butchers who will process meat for private use. And I thought this was really important to share. The dominant agricultural food system receives $3 to $4 billion in taxpayer subsidies a year through farm support payments. Aboriginal peoples in Canada make up roughly 4.3% of the population. If the Indigenous food sectors receive proportional production subsidies, those subsidies would equal $140 million a year. That would transform Indigenous access to Indigenous food systems. When we were doing the Indigenous Revitalizing the Indigenous Food System project, we also decided to add a research component. So we conducted a survey of everyone who participated in the workshops and the gardens and the volunteers. And our goal was to explore knowledge of Indigenous food systems and interest in doing more projects and initiatives around Indigenous food systems. So we surveyed, did a survey. It was just a 1 or 2 page survey, and we submitted a paper for publication. And I believe Fiji's going to say a little bit more about.
Just keep going.
No. She crunched the numbers, so.
Okay. Okay, so we did all these activities, these workshops, these literature, well, we did literature review. So we wanted to know what the people were thinking. So what were they thinking about traditional foods and the Indigenous food system. So what we had is when people came to our workshops, we had that survey, like Dan said. So we, first of all, what we can see here, these are the characteristics of the people who were involved in this project. So most of them were female. They were between the age of 19 and 30 years old. And more than half of them were from First Nations ancestry. Well, we had a mix, right? So we asked them some questions. So for example, we wanted to know if they had information about that topic before they came to the workshop. And what we found is that, well, like some of them, they already knew what the Indigenous food system were, but about a quarter of them, they didn't know what it was. Do they know what traditional foods are? So most of them, they agree with that. So they know what traditional foods are, but they don't know, well, most of them, okay, so they don't know where to harvest the food. They don't know how to harvest the traditional food. And they don't really know how to prepare and how to preserve the traditional food. So that was interesting. And a lot of these workshops, that's what they were about. We had elders talking about traditional foods and how to prepare and preserve these traditional food. But in the comments, people also told us that they would like to go in the field with the elder and harvest the food. So we had one medicine walk, but participants would like to have more of them. Would they be interested in being involved in more future activities? Well, we were happy to see that yes, like more than half of our participants, they would like to be involved in more workshops. So that's what we're trying to do this summer, to get more funding to eventually organize more of these workshops, because obviously there's a need for them. And then we'll switch again, but that's the last time.
So I just wanted, through the next few slides, I just wanted to kind of tie what we're learning from the project and the environmental scan together. So one of our goals was to increase food security knowledge and skills. So in that way, we were very successful. We had over 119 people involved, and 93% of them agreed that they had a better understanding of Indigenous food systems. What was learned, this is directly from our participants, they learned about traditional food uses, plant uses, traditional medicines and uses, and the importance of healthy lifestyle. So it always brings up those discussions about, how do you cook this, and what kind of meals you prepare, and what were your kids like and what won't they like, that kind of thing. So it's a real social event. I personally believe that in revitalization of Indigenous food systems is the core of revitalizing community resilience and health and sustainability. So strengthening food networks, increasing elder-youth connections. This is one of our goals. We had a fair bit of engagement on the Indigenous Food Systems Facebook page, but more is needed. We need to get out there more. A lot of people don't know about us. How do you revitalize Indigenous food systems? This is again from the participants. You learn to identify, prepare, and use traditional foods and medicines to treat ailments with food and plants. So food is medicine. You learn from elders and learn traditional ways how to do things, because there's a great depth of wisdom in how Indigenous people relate to Indigenous food and food species. Another way is to learn about yourself and how to live a healthy life. So the more self-determining you are in your food choices, the more you revitalize Indigenous food systems. Survey conclusions. So I just combined a couple of the agree and strongly agree. So we had 71% of the participants are in that age group, that 19 to 30 age group, that's considered at higher risk for less balanced and nutritious diets. What's interesting is that those that are age 60 and older, they're at lower risk. Aboriginal elders are the lowest risk for nutritional deficiencies. And this may demonstrate the effect of culture loss on hunting, fishing, gathering practices, and the ingestion of Indigenous foods in the diet. So Indigenous food systems provide balanced and nutritious diets. There's lots of information out there about Indigenous foods, especially CNA out of McGill. They've done a lot of analysis about Indigenous food nutrition. 78% of the participants want to learn more. So it's logical that making knowledge of traditional foods more available may increase the number of people consuming nutritious diets. So if we combine the findings from the project scan and the survey, continued exploration and revitalization of Indigenous food medicine systems is desired, ethical, and a logical response to high rates of Indigenous poverty and resulting food insecurities. Some of the major recommendations is to increase hands-on training out in the field of Indigenous youth by Indigenous knowledge holders, to support more research about Indigenous food and medicine systems in Saskatchewan, to advocate for financial support of Indigenous food medicine systems and projects, and reconcile relationships, all those government and treaty relationships around hunting, fishing, gathering, and processing of Indigenous foods and medicines for sharing, retail, and institutional use. I think that was all that we had. If there's any more information, if you have any more questions after this talk, just contact Fiji or I. And we are always looking for volunteers if you want to come and volunteer in the gardens or come to some of our workshops, and please get in touch with us.